Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Ochs Worx Lontra EDX. This is, I want to say it's the third production knife that he's done. I could be wrong about that. It's definitely the smallest in the bunch, and there was a pre-order a while back. By the time you guys are watching this review, many of you will be receiving yours soon. Perhaps you already have yours, which is why I kind of waited to get the review out until now. But I believe he's doing more of these. In any case, I will link them right down below so you guys can at least check out the listings. Thanks so much to Mr. Eric Ochs for loaning this sample for me to review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. This is not a base model. This is slightly up from base model. These are made by Riot, which I'll just go ahead and say right off the bat so that you guys know. But this one is, the base model is all titanium, and this version has the carbon fiber on both sides for just slightly more. We'll talk about price here in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and get a measurement. Overall length is coming in at about, let's get it exact, 6.65. Yeah, 6.65 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at about 2.95, not quite 3 inches. That's nice. He got it under 3. I think that's definitively under 3 inches. And then cutting edge is about 2.6 inches. Is that right? Let me make sure. Let me look again. Yeah, I call it 2.6. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. As you can see here, it's definitely smaller than both. How about up against the Demco AD 20.5? How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Again, smaller than both. How about up against the Benchmade Bugout? And then finally the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. Alrighty. How's the action on this guy? Like I said, made by Riot, and the action is phenomenal. When I unboxed this, I said, you know, that thumb stud is way out here, and it is definitely in the cutting path. I said it might be a better idea to move it back. And he said, yeah, that's true. I put it there for flickability. And it does. I mean, the positioning here, it does allow it to be flicked. I'm sort of going back and forth in my mind about whether or not it would be easier if it were higher up. But it does feel very natural to thumb flick this thing out, even with it being so small. It's actually very satisfying where it is. The reverse flick is, I like to get my, like the meat of my finger underneath there and flick it out. And that works, but because of the positioning, I find myself getting my fingernail underneath it and doing it. I think that moving it up higher would make it still very easy to forward flick, much easier to reverse flick, and it would clear more of the cutting path. But as it sits, it is fine, and it is very, very enjoyable to flick as a smaller knife. The front flipper is just phenomenal. I never would have guessed. It's so, you can hear it. I mean, it just is so snappy. And there's very little material here, but it's just shaped perfectly. Man, you really can get some leverage off of it. It's nice. It's better than I would have expected. I think the action is fantastic. Access to the lock bar is really, really good and really, really smooth, you know, for a smaller knife. I think, yeah, that's pretty much it there. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's about the same, but you get a little bit of contouring with this guy. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This just isn't going to be a knife that's difficult for most people to carry. You can see here it's just a lot smaller than some of the most preferred knives on earth. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools. Why is the little fat screwdriver gone today? I don't understand how that thing disappears. There we go. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. The pivot is a T8, and all of these screws here are also T8, including the screw for this inlay. I'm curious about how... interesting. Is there something underneath there? Let's take a look. There is a little teeny tiny... There must be something hidden. There's a little divot right there. This inlay, I was wondering how that was, you know, fixed in there if this one had a screw in it. Probably the reason he did this is so that you wouldn't have to look at a screw on the show side scale of this thing. But he's obviously found a way to fix that thing in there. In any case, that will only be the case with the versions of these that have inlays. But all of these screws are T8. And the pocket clip, by the way, is mountable on this side. Look at that perfectly curved filler tab. So you don't really notice it, but you still have the option to mount the clip on the other side so that lefties can enjoy this too without sacrificing any of the aesthetic details. That's nice. Just a couple of screws, so I would call this minimal hardware. I'm not going to complain too much. In fact, it absolutely is. This will be a simple knife to assemble and reassemble. Disassemble and reassemble. Let's go ahead and weigh it. We are looking at titanium, and in this case, carbon fiber, and then M390 for the blade. The standard ones are all tie, so they'll weigh slightly more than this. This comes in at 3.39 ounces, which some people will say is very heavy for a 3-inch blade, and I would say to those people, my goodness, it's a drama worthy of Days of Our Lives. Calm down. 3.39 ounces for this object. It's nice and lightweight, compact. Not something that most people will complain about. The balance is a bit back of the pivot. It's about right, in the middle of that sort of lock bar disengagement axis zone. But it's fine. Honestly, this just doesn't feel like a heavy object. It doesn't feel like a cumbersome object at all. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness. I'm going to guess that's about 125. Yeah, that says 123 thousandths. So not a thick blade at all. You might notice that the blade looks a little bit off-centered. This pivot has not been Loctited yet, right? So as it's sitting right there, it's a little bit off just from me flicking it. If I stick this in here and I just give it a quick turn, it goes right back to center. So a lot of people say, well, it should stay center. I prefer that they don't Loctite it from the factory. That way I can Loctite it and get it tuned, because no matter what, even if it is Loctited, you can guarantee that at some point it will come off or that Loctite will break and then you'll have to redo it anyway. And I'd rather just be able to adjust it myself. And after it's fully adjusted, just as smooth, just as easy to flick, right? So don't worry if you see, over the course of the review, it's coming off center. It just needs to be Loctited. But the tolerances allow for it to be centered and have good action. Anyways, this is a teeny tiny little guy, and my thing with teeny tiny knives is that's fine. I'm glad that people like them, and they obviously provide a lot of. This isn't a teeny tiny knife. I just mean it's smaller than what I normally carry. Some people really, really enjoy them, and they don't need, like me, I really want to have, it's kind of like how Ben has that rule about the length of his finger being, he doesn't want the blade to be any longer. I think Ben would like this knife. I'm going to guess that his fingers are longer than mine. But my rule is if I can't get a full purchase on the knife, then I won't carry it, at least generally speaking. I like to be able to have a full purchase, even if I'm not necessarily doing something that day that would require me to have that type of purchase on a knife. That's just what I prefer. And with that being the case, generally speaking, smaller knives are out of the question, right? But knives like this that have nice, big, roomy choils allow me to get a full grip. And because there's a decent amount of material here and it's contoured, it actually fills the hand in a really satisfying way. This is actually a very ergonomically satisfying little knife. I wear an XL glove, right? I don't have monstrous hands, but I don't have small hands either, and I can comfortably get a nice grip on this guy. It's really nice. The pocket clip is just a compliment. It's short, it's flat, and the edges are knocked down, so not a hot spot. All of the edges here are nicely knocked down. It's just kind of got this little pill body. The other thing I really like is smaller knives like this I often hold here to open packages, and so this little slot, it just is perfectly. It's almost like, a little metallic fingerprint. Like you're supposed to put your thumb here. I like that, and it's textured, sort of has that putter texturing right there, which is really, really nice. They do the texturing, then they mill a line, right? And then they sink the whole thing into the titanium. It's nice. And then we have this secondary area here for the inlay, which is just perfect. Riot does probably the best inlay work in the production knife world. Really nice carbon fiber, totally seamless transition from titanium to carbon fiber. Obviously, if you have the basic version, if you order the basic version, you're not going to have this inlay here. It's just all titanium. The titanium sort of has, I guess, I don't know if we're going to call that like a lightly tumbled or maybe even blasted look to it, but it's a nice contrast to the blade, which is just a satin finish, which is fine. I always prefer, a tumbled finish, but the satin finish is fine. The swedge up here is a little tiny bit sharp, not that big of a deal. Most of the time, you're not going to have your finger up there unless you're doing draw cuts, which the edge or the nose of the blade is slightly pointed down, which I think is good because it allows you to keep control without putting your finger up. I always find that it's a little awkward to do draw cuts with a traditional drop point. It just doesn't feel as natural. With this being a shorter blade and having the nose dropped a bit, it's just really nice. And the positioning that you're in, right here, here, and here with these three fingers, it just feels very natural. So I don't know if that was on purpose, but I like that, right? Like I said, really nice choil, plenty roomy. The thumb stud is definitely in the cutting path. So if you're going to cut straight down, you're going to run into that thumb stud. Fortunately, we don't always cut straight. Most of the time, we're not cutting straight down. We're cutting at an angle, but that is enough in the way that you will run into it. So just be cognizant of that. There is a flat that carries out maybe 50% the length of the blade. We've got a cool little swedge up here, a little bit different. Kind of it makes me look like it makes me think of some sort of exotic bird beak, right? Which they were evolved to like carve into things and get into nuts and whatever. So I don't know, maybe having a blade shaped kind of like that makes a lot of sense, I guess. I think this is a good geometry, good size and length, thinness behind the edge for M390. I think M390 is well accentuated by smaller, thinner blades like this. It'll work really well. The edge is done just perfectly, nice and bitey, nice and thin, just what we expect from Riot. And, the geometry is done well, which was the design of Eric. We have, like I said, a mounting position for the pocket clip on the left side, which is nice. We have a full milled backspacer. It's got a little bit of a gear pattern there. I like the little bronze look at it. You can get a bunch of different colors, right? I think they have blue, bronze, just standard, right? A few different options. There's a lanyard thing for lanyard people, so great. But more importantly, I want to point out it's a milled titanium backspacer and a milled clip, not a stamped clip and standoffs, which would have been a much less expensive way to do this. Doesn't add an enormous amount of cost to the knife, but it's nice to see, we're getting that. We are getting texturing, we're getting an inlay in this case. The backspacer, the milled clip, right? The contrasting hardware, which I assume is titanium. In fact, we can just check that. Do I have my angles for it? There it is. Yeah, this is all of it's titanium. So that's nice, right? Those are details that we have to consider there, right? Exposed frame lock slightly underneath the inlay here, but it does have a steel lock bar insert that doubles as an additional over travel stop, so that's nice. No lock stick or anything. The stop pin is located here, little tiny bit of shouldering. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. Easy disengagement. No pivot lash. Very smooth. Very smooth. And a nice clicky detent. Again, I think this is probably going to slightly come off center. Again, we'll just recenter it. If you get yours and you're like, oh no, it's coming off center. Blue 242 Loctite. It comes in a red container, which is a little bit confusing, but it looks just like this. This is what you want. You just need a teeny, weeny little drop. Nothing, right? Whatever you think the size of a drop is, cut it in half, right? That's what you want on the pivot, right? Or the threads on the pivot. And then you screw it in, you leave it alone, place where, it's, I believe it's oxygen cannot get to it, and leave it alone for a day or so. And then you'll have, everything centered up, the action the way that you want, etc. Don't return it for that. That's a silly reason to return a knife. This is good. The thumb stud, I'm still kind of back and forth on the thumb stud thing, but this is a good knife. I'm trying to be, as objective as I can. This is my least favorite from Ochs Worx. But it is a very, very good design, right? I prefer his other stuff was much more up my alley, and I think it's honestly just because of the overall size, right? I like the size more. But this is still extremely good. And, considering everything we're getting here, and that these are made by Riot, which Riot is just a little bit extra on the sauce in a good way. Their quality's just still a little bit better, right? Base price of these came in at $280, which, considering everything we got here, is not bad. Now, there's always going to be people going, small knife, small money, right? Which is just dumb. That's not how it works, right? But I don't think that that's a bad price for this, honestly. I mean, this is very competitive. Usually when we see these Riot, these Riot made knives, I mean, compare this to the Chavez Redemption 229, which I think comes in at $350, $375 now. But that's a bigger knife. Yeah, I get it. It's bigger, right? But the amount of material does not equate that much more in terms of cost, right? It's the total amount of work involved in it that's really going to dictate that. And there's just simply, I think there's just more detail in this, right? I still like the Chavez Redemption. I'm just saying, right? I mean, we have Riot knives, like tons of Riot knives like that come in around $350, right? So I think this is fine. I actually would like to see a larger version of this. I think this is a cool knife that would translate really well. Doesn't have to scale up or anything. Just make the handle and the blade longer. I think it would do very well. But as this sits, I think the base price of $280 for the titanium one, I think you're going to pay $30 or $40 more for the inlay version, something like that. Maybe a little bit less. Might be $300 for the inlay versions. I don't think that's unfair. The price doesn't blow me away, and the design itself doesn't blow me away, but it's a good design, right? I think generally speaking, this is recommendable. It's not going to be for everybody, but it is a nice knife. Eric Ochs knows what he's doing. We're going along here. I'm at the point now where I've handled enough of his work that I think, pretty much anything this guy makes is probably going to be good. I'm going to expect it to be good. So I'm excited to see what else he comes out with in the future. But this is good. I prefer his other models, but I think many people will like this. And if you were looking at it and you're like, I just wanted to make sure that it was a good design, right? If I was a little on the fence, I'd say you're good to go. If you like how this looks, you like the idea of it, right? And this video has done enough for you, then pull the trigger. You'll enjoy it if they're available. And those of you who did order them, I think you're going to be very happy with them if you don't have them in hand yet. That's going to be pretty much it today. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.